Good morning. Let me say the case that we have been dealing with now for the last several weeks around Nolan Wells is indicative of many cases around the country that have raised serious questions with racial overtones. Attorney Crump and I are going tomorrow, where I'm doing the eulogy for a young black man in Madison, Wisconsin, homeless, and they say had a knife, and there's the tape of him being shot, 3 cops surrounding him, shot and killed, 4 shots. And these cases building up in a climate of an administration in Washington that we cannot feel will objectively investigate. There was a time that we could say if state authorities fail us, we can go to the Justice Department. Even under George Bush, we went to the Justice Department. We, at this point, have to hope that one, we could deal with civil courts, or secondly, that there's a balance of power with the Democrats taking the House in November, and maybe the Judiciary Committee under that can at least put a check and balance on cases that need to be investigated.
Okay.
Flag on the plate.
Y'all, there was a press conference a couple of days ago. And I listened to this press conference. It's behind the backdrop of the National Association of Black Journalists. And this press conference was incredibly disappointing. It was disappointing to me, but then I said, no, you know what? I said this was eye-opening. This was eye-opening because they said the quiet part out loud. And I'm not a prophet, nor am I the daughter of a prophet, but I told y'all weeks ago, I said, this is absolutely political. This is absolutely part. Unofficially, we'll say unofficially, but it's moving like it's official. This is unofficially a part of the 2026 Democrat Party's midterm election interference strategy. Why do I call it interference? Well, because, as you guys know, the Democrats do have a history of swaying the outcome of elections, and they have a toolbox of tools that they dig into every election cycle. And we all know one of the tools that never seems to fail them is to exploit a tragedy on the basis of ethnicity, rile up the blacks, get them all in their feelings, have them, marching with the bloodstained banner of victimhood and racial grievance. Also, they can usher them to the polls and sway the election in the direction that they want them to go. And this year is particularly important. Why? What did we see happen all summer long, all through the spring? We saw redistricting, right? We saw the whole gerrymandering conversation come to the forefront. We saw it in Tennessee. We saw it in Louisiana. We saw the Congressional Black Caucus shaking in their boots. They said, oh no, our power is loosening. The blacks are waking up. The folks, the red states in the South are no longer playing along, and they're trying to take these districts from us. That's what happened. I know y'all think I'm dramotional. That's dramatic and emotional kind of blended together. But I'm telling the truth. What we've seen for the past 60 years is this power structure within Black America, where we've had these plantation overlords called the Congressional Black Caucus members. You got Clyburn out there in South Carolina. You got Mad Maxine with that horrible wig out there in California. Down here in Georgia, we got Hank Johnson, Mr. Low IQ. Guam is going to tip over. Like, we have them spaced out all over the place. But these members of the Congressional Black Caucus, they preside over majority Black districts. And the moment these red states were like, well, wait a minute, New York is gerrymandered, California is gerrymandered, like, it's time that we redraw some of these maps, because the electoral demographic is starting to change. And we don't really have any representation here. And more importantly, why are these districts drawn on the basis of ethnicity? Do all black people think the same? Or, I mean, I know most of us vote blue no matter who, but not I, says the cat. I don't vote blue. And so when the redistricting conversation, I know I'm taking y'all into the kitchen and y'all like, why are we going into the weeds? This matters. It matters and it's relevant to this Nolan Wells case. And I'm about to explain why. It matters because if maps get redrawn and all of a sudden those congressional districts that were majority black, which technically is a violation of voting rights legislation, or should I say it's discriminatory on its basis. If these congressional black districts, these individuals, they won't be able to compete because no one's going to vote for them outside of the blacks who are just conditioned to vote for them anyway. If they start losing power, mind you, it's not black people are losing their right to vote. No, it's black Democrat Marxist politicians. They're the ones losing their power. They're not going to go out without a fight. And because they're not going down without a fight, that means the gloves are off. They don't care who the casualties of war must be. Even if they got to go down to Mississippi in a small boating community that wasn't bothering nobody. These folks were down there minding their business. If the right tragedy happens to manifest itself, they figured we can put a racist narrative on this, spin a tragedy that's not a crime. We don't know what happened to Nolan Wells, but if we can spin this in our favor, maybe, just maybe, we can use this to galvanize the blacks and give them a reason to vote for us. Not because our policies are good, not because we have any sort of measurable results that have proven to improve their conditions. They don't have that. The schools are still trash. There still is no economic development. Wage gap is still the same. They're out here advocating for illegals and giving them your jobs, moving them into your communities and giving them your resources. But that doesn't matter. As long as there's always a problem, they always have something to campaign on. And what is the one thing that they campaign on that they know will get you in your feelings, have you put your defenses down and run to the polls out of fear mongering alone? What is that? It is racism. The fear of the racist white boogeyman who's behind every nook and cranny. If they can just make sure that ghost is always haunting you, always chasing you, then they've got a legitimate campaign strategy that they know will yield them some measurable results as it relates to the black vote. So what does this have to do with Nolan Wells? Well, I'm about to tell you. Actually, I'm not about to tell you anything. You know who's going to tell you? Al Sharpton. Okay, Al Sharpton is going to be the one to tell you in his own words. Now, Al Sharpton's holding this press conference. And it's interesting because I thought, ladies and gentlemen, that this was supposed to be a press conference about determining how this 18-year-old young man died. But that's not what you're about to hear. Like I said, I need Al Sharpton to tell you in his own words. So y'all take and listen to this.
Good morning. Let me say the case that we have been dealing with now for the last several weeks around Nolan Wells is indicative of many cases around the country that have raised serious questions with racial overtones. Attorney Crump and I are going tomorrow, where I'm doing the eulogy for a young black man in Madison, Wisconsin, homeless, and they say had a knife, and there's the tape of him being shot. 3 cops surrounding him, shot and killed, 4 shots. And these cases building up in a climate of an administration in Washington that we cannot feel will objectively investigate. There was a time that we could say if state authorities fail us, we can go to the Justice Department. Even under George Bush, we went to the Justice Department. We, at this point, have to hope that one, we could deal with civil courts, or secondly, that there's a balance of power with the Democrats taking the House in November, and maybe the Judiciary Committee under that can at least put a check and balance on cases that need to be investigated.
Okay.
Flag on the play.
Flag on the play. Let me just kind of summarize what he said. But basically, Al Sharpton begins by talking about, this Nolan Wells case resembles so many other cases with racial overtones. And I'm like, really, Al, how is that? How is that the case? Actually, most of these cases did not have racial overtones at all. What they did was they inserted the racial overtone. The ethnic narcissist always believes that the racial overtone is ever present among us because they just make it up, right? So anytime there is an incident that involves black or white or black and Asian, black and anything else, well, other than Hispanic, they don't really regard the Latinos too much. So it could be a black and Hispanic and no one's going to claim racism. But usually it's black and white, secondarily black and Asian. Whenever there is some sort of incident that occurred where those are the two ethnicities in question, they assume there's a racial overtone. Now, we can prove without a shadow of a doubt in so many of these cases that race did not play a part in what happened or was the proximate cause of the incident. But it doesn't stop them from inserting race into the discussion because racial grievance and if you're a race hustler, and this is your currency of choice. So you've got to find it or insert it wherever it doesn't exist. So he mentions that, so many cases like this included with racial overtones. And I'm like, who mentioned race other than y'all? What they did was they saw that this case was ripe to pull the wool over people's eyes because of geographic location. It is in Mississippi. Okay. And I'd like to say this. I need people who live in Mississippi. Do not allow these individuals to force you to live under the perpetual condemnation of the past, especially if you are a Christian and you are free in Jesus and you've been made alive in Christ Jesus. Whatever happened in the past, if you've repented of your sin and placed your faith in Christ alone, that has nothing to do with you. There is now, therefore, no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Now, you would think a pulpit pimp, this bobblehead right here, would know and understand that if he understood the scriptures and loved God and loved his word. But no, he's a false shepherd. He's a wolf. He's out here perpetrating like he's a pastor, but he's not. He is no reverend. Okay, this is why the racial grievance can never die. This is why the black community can never heal, because he doesn't want them healed. He doesn't want people who've never 9 times out of 10 experience any sort of legitimate discrimination. He doesn't want you to be free in Jesus and to live as free citizens. You would think somebody like Al Sharpton would be encouraging the black community to lay claim of their American heritage, to function in their freedom, and to live as free citizens in this great country. But he can't make money and raise money off of a message like that. So when he talks about, we're in a climate, where this case has racial overtones, and then here comes the kicker. Shortly after that, he introduced the balance of power with Democrats taking the House in November. And I said, well, wait a minute. I thought this was supposed to be a press conference about determining how an 18-year-old died. Why am I listening to a campaign commercial about Democrats taking Congress? Like, what, how did we get here, Al? That this press conference is supposed to be about determining what happened to Nolan Wells, but instead it increasingly became this argument about the Justice Department and how, well, we could go at least under Bush. We could seek some sort of remedy. But now Black America, you got this situation down in Mississippi and all the racism and Trump. Don't forget Trump. The Congressional Black Caucus, what we can do, what we need. See, this how we gonna fix all this, right? According to Al, his solution is you gotta make sure that you give Democrats control of Congress. Because if you don't, we'll have no recourse or remedy to protect you from the racist white boogeyman that was nowhere to be found down in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Now, I'm not sure if it's this clip, but y'all remember maybe a month or two ago, I did the show clowning Al Sharpton because in a couple of weeks, at the end of this month, he's having that March on Washington. The National Action Network is sponsoring. They've got boatloads of victim class Black folks driving and descending upon Washington, D.C. And do you know why they are convening on D.C.? They are convening to march for voting rights. Now, last time I checked, Black folks are still voting. I voted in the primaries, and then we had a special election down here because David Scott, the congressional member from my district, he died. I voted. My son voted for the first time. Blacks are not having any problems at the polls voting. But why? Why is Al Sharpton having a march for voting rights? It's because it's not about your right to vote. It is about these Black Marxist politicians losing their districts because the maps have been redrawn, because it's unconstitutional to draw a map on the basis of all these funky looking maps. What they do is they try to figure out where is the highest concentration of the Blacks, draw maps around them, keep them locked in a district, and notice what is very eerily similar about all these Black districts. They're all poor. They're all dependent on the government. Lots of SNAP, EBT, Section 8, poor infrastructure, no economic development. Businesses are fleeing these districts, not flocking to these districts. No business wants to invest in a congressional Black district. Why? That's because the members of Congress don't want. They don't want them to invest. They have to keep the people dependent because as long as you have limited freedom, limited mobility, limited access to do anything, they will always have something to campaign on. They like it like this. Look at Maxine Waters' district. Look at Jim Clyburn's district. He think he treating them Black folks good. He give y'all free fish, a fish fry, and he makes sure he can bus you to a good domestic job in other parts of the county. But in terms of bringing jobs and industry to that district specifically, no, he ain't about to do that. The Blacks might get a little bit too beside themselves and actually try to make themselves and improve their station in life. They got to keep pushing abortion. They make sure that Planned Parenthood targets your communities. Al Sharpton made sure that the menthol stayed in the cigarettes because it kept Black folks addicted to the cigarettes more. They don't want you. They don't want your health improved. They don't want you to have access to better food choices. They love the food desert. Now they complain about the food desert, but they don't really care about the food desert. All of this. He has a march scheduled for voting rights at the end of this month. And in the middle of this speech I thought a young Black boy mysteriously died and we just had questions about what happened to him. But against the backdrop of that, 1 minute and 52 seconds in, Al Sharpton, he shows us his hand. He says the quiet part out loud. He starts talking about the balance of power in Congress. In a midterm election cycle, several months before the midterm elections, do you think that was a coincidence? Oh no. He did that on purpose because unfortunately these young men, Warren, Jax, Morgan, down in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, have found themselves the object of their wrath, and they've done nothing. These young boys are like, how did we get here? Why is this the direction that this discussion is going in? We've done nothing wrong. It's because they don't care who they destroy, who they have to step on, what lies they tell. When the ethnic narcissist is losing power, and they will crash out, and they will, by any means necessary, by hook or by crook, they will ensure that they don't go down without a fight. Think about it. Jasmine Crockett. Now, she lost her seat because she was getting too big for britches and she wanted to run for Senate, which was dumb. Al Green, drawn out of his district, lost his seat, right? We have several other members that either their districts no longer exist. You have down there in Florida with Sheila Shefferlis McCormick and the little freak nasty rapper, and then the white Jewish lady. They're all fighting for that black district. And so now the Democrats are fighting each other. Like, this is all about a power grab. And at the center of this black political power grab, you've got a small boat community they found themselves the object of these people's wrath. And I'm sure if you are from Ocean Springs, Mississippi, you're trying to figure out what in the heck does any of this have to do with us? Listen, you were chosen. They chose you like they choose every other victim that they want to exploit. But what's different in this case, these young men have nothing to hide, and they are fighting back. I didn't have to make this up. Now, I've been saying this for weeks that this was the plan, but he finally let the cat out the bag. They've abandoned evidence. The evidence doesn't matter. We've now abandoned logic and forensic science. All those things have been abandoned, and now we're just doing barnyard jurisprudence. That's what we're doing now. I'm gonna let Al finish because he's gonna start hollering, or at least talking about some hollering in a moment. Let's take a listen.
But we are right now where we have two parents, lovely parents, I've gotten to know them, that really don't have an answer to the question, is it a civil rights violation or not? And we do not know. How do you trust the words of people that say immediately there was no foul play when you haven't even investigated whether there was foul play? How do you trust people that come back from something that happened and never really give you a straight story of what happened, including you have the keys to the car?
Now you see
So
that. No.
questions-
This is the Weasley way. This Negro bulls, he get on my nerves. I can't, y'all. I'm sorry. I love Jesus, but I hate every false way, and Al Sharpton represents every false way. He is really good. We're going to talk about a rhetorical device that Al Sharpton uses. He's very slick with it. The ethnic narcissist is trained in this. What they do is they take a bunch of disjointed facts that either have plausible explanations for it or have already been debunked, but they lump them all in together. It's like a moving target. Like you're trying to keep up with it, but it's moving so much. You're like, well, wait a minute, let's stay right there. But boom, they've already moved. They've moved to something else. He's talking about car keys and, well, how can you say it's no foul play if it hadn't been investigated? What the brain dead moron doesn't understand is that in this community, when these drownings happen, usually they kind of know what to look for. They're not saying that they had no intention on investigating. Preliminary, in the preliminary findings. Ooh, I was struggling, y'all. Did I do it? In the preliminary findings of the investigation of Nolan Wells, if investigators don't see signs of foul play, it wasn't that they were ready to shut this case down. I get it. A lot of people are like, well, maybe they shouldn't have said anything. That might be true. But it did not stop them from exhausting all kinds of efforts to get to the bottom of it. But if you look at a body, you're like, okay, we don't see any signs of a struggle. We don't see strangulation. There are no marks on this body. Of course, we're going to investigate, but from the looks of it, it doesn't look like it's any foul play. What Al Sharpton does is he takes that detail and wants to use that as the basis of, yeah, we can't trust Mississippi because before they even investigated anything, they determined there was no foul play, which is not true. To say at the moment we don't see any signs of foul play is not the same as we're not going to investigate and do anything else because it's an open and shut case. That is not what happened. That is not what happened. He also mentioned something that I thought was interesting. He wants this fair and thorough investigation. And I'd like to bring up a detail that doesn't get highlighted much. They were the initial ones that talked about the cell phone being an object of suspicion. This is the same phone that has now come out that we now know that is still in their possession, and it has never undergone an examination or an investigation. But do you know whose phones were voluntarily and immediately submitted to be investigated and scrubbed and extracted and all manner of things done to it? All three of those boys were like, look, early on, here's our phone. We whatever it takes to get to the bottom of what happened to Nolan, we will voluntarily submit to it. Criminals do not volunteer and offer their personal property to be subject to an investigation, especially when they're not a suspect of a crime. But they had nothing to hide. But why is it that we had to get a letter 30 plus days after the fact that said, well, I mean, we're willing to cooperate, we just need to name the place and name the time and, jointly and collaboratively we'll work together. No, pimping. That's not how this works. Now, I know a lot of people have been saying, well, why wasn't the phone subpoenaed? We do not have evidence of a crime, but this is not Law and Order SVU. This is the real world with real people's lives. They can't just roll up to Christine Wansley and snatch the phone saying this is evidence and if she doesn't volunteer it and hand it over to be examined, and if there's no evidence to support that a crime has been committed, how do the investigators get a subpoena? On what basis are they asking for the phone? There's got to be some sort of probable cause. And based on the other details of this investigation, there are no details to a point that is. So she would have to say, listen, whatever I can do to cooperate and help us find what happened to my son, here is his phone. But she holding on to that phone for dear life. And I've got some suspicions as to the reasons why I think that is. And we're not going to get into that right now. Maybe we'll do that another day. But listen to the Weasley way. We're about to get into his barnyard jurisprudence. He about to start talking about hollering and pigs and farms and stuff in a minute.
Than answers. You have to have people that will drive the answers out, and that's what we do. And that's why I've been involved, and that's why we stay involved. And it gets worse and worse and worse. The parent of one of the boys threatening to sue us.
Hold on a second. I don't want to get ahead of myself. We are absolutely going to talk about the parents of the gentleman threatening to sue. Oh yeah, we're going to talk about that. And I'm glad that they are. These poverty pimps and race hustlers are so comfortable and they are so high on their own supply that they never expect the objects of their wrath to fight back, to stand up for themselves and to defend themselves. And so now you're about to watch those who were guilty of playing or asserting that these young boys must know something. It's one black boy and all of these white boys. Somebody saw something. Well, Now he's about to start whining like a little girl because the wrath is coming. And when I say when the reign of terror rains down on Al Sharpton, he's going to wish that he had retired and let this go. Al Sharpton, Ben Crump are going to wish that they had just left this town alone and left these people alone. These people are not playing with them. And as a matter of fact, we're going to talk about all of us can do something. You may not have a podcast. You may not have an audience that you can talk to, but we are currently in a battle for the reputation and for the lives of these young men that are being destroyed at the hands of this race grievance crowd. There is a way that you can support these young men, and I'm going to drop the link to their GoFundMe. The best thing you can do for these young boys, yes, we want you to pray. We want you to pray that the unfruitful deeds of darkness would be exposed and that biblical justice would prevail in their favor. We also, yes, we want to pray that the investigators can put together and figure out what actually happened to Nolan Wells. But what you can also do is support the GoFundMe for the litigation fund for these young men who have to defend themselves. Oh, they're not just coming after Al Sharpton and Ben Crump. There are so many content creators, all of the lies and the accusations that have been hurled toward the individuals involved on the other side of this. They need to be held accountable. And it's going to be expensive. It's one thing for these young men to retain legal counsel for them. But in order to go after all of the individuals who've been running their gums and lying and participating in all kinds of nefarious deeds in order to implicate and defame these young men, you've got to go to every jurisdiction and you've got to retain legal counsel there so that you can collaboratively all work together to serve and sue each person. No, they can't sue everybody, but they are going for the big fish. And so if any of my moderators are able to grab the link to the GoFundMe for Warren and Jax and Morgan, I would greatly appreciate it. But if not, I've got a little note to remind myself at the end, and then I'll pin a comment